hey, it's Emily, and today for the second day of Bookmas, or the second video of Bookmas, I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up and talking about the books that I read in the month of November. So let's just jump right in. I'm very excited to talk about them. The first book I read, or finished, was Dune by Frank Herbert. I have a standalone review for this one, so I'll be sure to link that below and check that one out for more thoughts about both the book and the adaptation. But yeah, I loved it. I loved the world, the politics. It was such an imaginative and really fun read, and I also enjoyed the movie. But yeah, more thoughts in that video. But this follows the Atreides family as they are told to go and kind of take over leadership of the planet Arrakis, or Dune, where there is a spice that is only produced on that planet that's incredibly important. And so basically they're just embroiled in a bunch of politics and need to figure it out, and it's super interesting. The next book that I finished in the month of November was The Echo Wife by Sarah Gale. This one follows a woman who has a clone. That her research area, she's a scientist, her research is about cloning. And she has a clone that her husband actually fell in love with and cheated on her with, and so she leaves her husband, and her clone one day contacts her to tell her that her husband, our main character's former husband, is dead and there's a mess to clean up. Super intriguing. I just had a really fun time listening to this one and really wanted to just always know what was going to be happening next, and just found it super engaging and fun. So if you like thrillers with a bit of a science twist, would highly recommend. The next book I read was One to Watch by Kate Stayman London, and this one basically follows a plus-size blogger who is selected to be the next main squeeze, which is basically the next Bachelorette. And so she goes on this dating show and, is trying to navigate this dating show and being a very public figure. She was already a public figure and a very successful blogger, and talks about the fashion industry, talks about how size is represented in and talked about in media and in culture. And I will also leave, I actually had heard Beautifully Bookish Bethany's review of this before reading, so I kind of had some of those things that she was talking about in mind, and definitely can see some of the criticisms. I will just leave her review, her Goodreads review below, which also links her video if you're interested, because I think she says it way better than I could. So I'll be sure to leave that below, and kind of her thoughts on why it wasn't exactly the fat representation that she was looking for in a book like this. But I did still find it pretty entertaining and fun and just kind of easy to get through, and ultimately I had a fun time with it. Didn't super impact me, but entertaining enough. The next book that I read in the month of November is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, and this is by Grace Lynn, and this is a middle grade adventure about Min Lee, who is trying to bring her family fortune, and she is looking to find the old man of the moon and trying to seek him out in order to ask how she can bring her family fortune. She lives in a small ricing village, and is trying to help her family out, and it's her adventure trying to do that, and she has a cute dragon friend that goes along with her. It's just precious, and just really talks about her learning about what's important and what she really values and who she wants to be as a person. And it's just precious and so much fun. So if you're in the mood for a middle grade adventure, I can't recommend enough. The next book I read was The Love Hypothesis by Ellie Hazelwood. Absolutely love this. This is a STEM enemies to lovers romance that follows a couple of academics who, for reasons, decide to fake date, and of course fall in love along the way, and also it follows her research as well and why she's passionate about it, and her trying to navigate her academic career, as well as this fake dating situation. It follows her going to a conference to talk about her work and some things that happened there. It was amazing. It was also, I really appreciated that there was demisexual representation in here as well. I don't believe it was actually, the word was actually said, but she did describe her feelings and thoughts around not experiencing sexual attraction before actually being emotionally connected to someone. And it was so nice to actually see that in a book and see some of her experiences and thoughts, and just, yeah, it was great. It was great. absolutely entertaining time listening to this one. I also read this via audio, and the narrator was great. So would highly recommend. Absolutely had a fantastic time with that one. The next book I read in the month of November is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I listened to this with my boyfriend actually, and a super interesting concept. And there were a few things about the execution that maybe weren't my favorite. I did overall really enjoy this though. And it follows a world where people are basically experiencing a set of memories about a life that they hadn't lived, but experiencing it in a very vivid way and experiencing it as though they had lived that life. But now that life is kind of these black and gray, you know, images that are still super vivid. And so it follows our main character and a couple of others trying to figure out what's going on and trying to figure out how it came about that memories were being manipulated, what's going on, you know, how that's happening, why people are trying to do it, why people are trying to stop it, and figure out what they can do to save the world. Super interesting, definitely very entertaining, and would highly recommend. And I think if you liked his other book, Dark Matter, I think you'll really enjoy this one as well. So I feel like there was a similar, I could definitely tell there was a similar vibe in that, and they cover some similar themes, although they're definitely not the same book, but I had a really fun time listening to this one. There were a couple of things about the ending that were left vague that my boyfriend was frustrated with, but I had a really fun time listening to this one. The next book I finished in the month of November is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. I'll actually show you the cover. This is the Fairy Loot edition with art on the back of the dust jacket, but that's the cover. And this one follows a woman who is trying to work off a debt, and her sister is actually taken by the Fae, or sold to the Fae, and she needs to go get her sister back, and so she needs to go undercover in a different Fae court and steal some relics, but she learns more and more about these two different Fae courts, the interactions between these courts, and kind of some of the history of their courts and how they've also interacted with the human realm, and she ultimately needs to find her place in the fairy world in order to rescue her sister. Super entertaining. I actually had a really great time with this one, and I actually really liked some of the characters. I thought the pacing overall was pretty good. There were some slower moments, and I kind of wanted the pace to pick back up a bit, but overall super entertaining, and I wanted to just keep reading and figuring out what would happen. I thought our character was a pretty interesting, fine, relatively typical YA character who just wants to find her sister and save her, and figures out some things about her life along the way. And interesting, yeah, I had a really good time with this one as well. The next book that I read in the month of November this is The Bright and the Pale, and this is again the Fairy Loot version, but I will show you. There's the cover, and I also actually really enjoyed this Fairy Loot as well. And this one follows a world where there was kind of a freeze, and she, after that freeze has kind of been on her own, she is part of I say a gang of thieves. There's an entire group that also is very connected to the political power of this world, and she's kind of found refuge in this group, but also really wants to. Her friend Alec was actually killed, or so she thinks he was killed about a year before the story starts, but she finds out that he's actually alive, and so she needs to go on an adventure to rescue him. And she figures out some things about the world that she wasn't sure were real, but she figures out more about this freeze. She figures more about the religion in this world is super interesting, but she figures out more about her abilities, she figures out more about the gods, and is ultimately trying to not only rescue Alec, but also help make sure that the people like her, so there's a plague, that, or at least people are convinced that there's a plague around where she's from, and really that could be a guise to just be able to control some of the natural resources that are in this area. And so the people who are from this area are treated horribly and ostracized by society, and so she's also trying to figure out what she can do to protect the people from where she's from around that area. So she goes on an adventure to find her friend, help her people, and, you know, try to make their lives better. And it was super interesting. I really enjoyed the characters. It was a super, if you're looking for kind of a wintry fantasy, this one is perfect, because you could, like, everything was just cold and ice and snow. So very intriguing world, very intriguing characters, and yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what happens next. And so I actually ordered the Fairy Loot edition of the second one. The next book that I read, I listened to the audio while I was driving to see family for Thanksgiving. That is Darlene Rose Gold by Stephanie Robel. You follow a mother and daughter, and the daughter is Rose Gold, and her mother is Patty, and you follow, Patty has been in prison for about 5 years because she was poisoning her daughter, and then, you know, taking her to all these doctors and trying to be her caretaker and really wanting to feel like her daughter needed her, but poisoning her to make that happen. And is it Munchausen by proxy? Is that what it's called? Anyway, so her mother is sent to prison for 5 years for poisoning her daughter and really isolating her daughter throughout her entire childhood. And you follow the mother as she is getting out of prison, and her daughter has decided to take her in after picking her mom up from prison. And her, you know, her mom finds out that some weird things are happening, not in a paranormal sense or anything, but just like some things that make her question whether or not her daughter has actually forgiven her start to happen. And so she's wondering whether or not her daughter is trying to get revenge for what happened. And then you also follow Rose Gold right after her mother is sent to prison, and so you kind of follow her experience after her mother's been in prison, her trying to survive after that, and you kind of go forward in time a bit to like up to the point where she's about to be released. And then anyway, so the two times eventually start to come together, but it's a super interesting story. And I did call what ended up happening, but I had such a good time learning more about Rose Gold, learning more about Patty. They're both very, very messed up characters, and you really just don't know who to trust, and you don't know who to root for in certain situations. They both made a lot of mistakes. They both are, again, just pretty morally gray characters after everything that both of them have been through, and you kind of go into their history a bit too. So interesting and entertaining. It did kind of end quickly, I think, but I still had a good time with it. And the final book that I read in the month of November was also such a good one. I really did have a good reading month, and that is Beasts of Prey by Iona Gray. This was also sent in a Fairy Loot box, and I loved this one. This one was so good. You follow Kofi, who is I kind of feel like this was like if a circus, it's like a mix between a circus and a zoo. So you follow this night zoo where there are a bunch of these creatures kept from all over this land, but they also do shows and performances. So it's not just a zoo where you just kind of walk through and see, like, they do different performances with the animals and kind of show the animals in a particular way. And so it's kind of a cross between some sort of circus and a zoo. And Kofi is kind of indebted and is paying her debt to the owner of the night zoo, and so she needs to work off her debt. And something happens one night when some important people are visiting the night zoo, and it's really important that they impress these people. Something happens and Kofi realizes that she has some abilities that she wasn't aware of, and she needs to escape. She needs to escape the night zoo. And you also follow Ekon, and Ekon is trying to become, so he's not in the night zoo, but he's kind of in a city that's nearby, and he's trying to become a warrior for this city. And so one of his tasks at one point is to go help after what happened with Kofi that night. She's trying to escape. This force that he's trying to become a part of, this fighting force, needs to go and kind of help keep things under control. So they end up meeting that night, and their fates are kind of intertwined when they both need, for reasons, they both need to go after this creature called the Shitani. And one of them wants the Shitani alive, one of them wants the Shitani dead. But they team up to go find this creature and kind of only tell half-truths about why they're trying to find this creature. And so they're trying to go into this forest in order to find this creature, and they find out that creature is not what they thought it was, and so they need to figure out the right thing to do after finding out that information. Anyway, it was so good. The imagery in this is so vivid, and it was really, really cool to picture everything that was happening. I feel like this would be a really cool thing to be adapted. Anyway, but it was so fun to follow both of these characters and follow their motivations, figure out why they were doing what they were doing, and figure out what their goals were and how that changes along the way as they're trying to survive in this forest that has all sorts of creatures and dangers. And so good. Just so good. I love this one a lot. So that's everything I read in the month of November. Please let me know if you've read any of these or are interested in any of these. And of course, I'll be sure to leave my Twitter and Instagram link down below. That's where I like to hang out. Be sure to subscribe for more bookish content and for all the videos that I'm going to be posting in the month of December. Not one every day, but more frequently than I normally post. And I'm very excited for all of them. So be sure to subscribe for that. And I will also leave more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.